and welcome to Dungeons and Drama Nerds. My name is Todd, and I'm here today with Nick.
Hi.
And Percy.
Hello.
Today we're celebrating the end of our first season, and we'll be reflecting a little on the games and commentary episodes we've done, the things we've learned, and answering some questions from our listeners. So to kick it off, let's talk our top actual play moment of the season. Percy, you want to tee it up?
I think my favorite moment, throwing it all the way back to our first game, is how much the D&D cast hated the mouse that I tried so hard to make helpful and lovable.
Again, fuck that mouse.
I was trying really hard, and it just, sometimes things just don't work out. So that moment of hubris for me personally, I also love Squick with my whole heart, and Squick's rallying call to the workers in our paranoia game. Nick.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a cheat because it's not exactly a moment, but I loved the emergence of eggs as a central motif in Irremediably Home. It was just one of those things that I think could not really have been, I would never have guessed was going to happen when we were putting the game together. And I was just so delighted by the way it happened and really by that entire arc.
Absolutely. For me, I honestly think it's when Ben and Romana, who did not know each other before playing this game and didn't know each other very well when this happened, when they just started keening with each other in the worship of friend computer. And it just got buck wild in a way I was unprepared for. And it's been very exciting to watch both of them yes and that hard in games that we've played since.
Amazing. What about a moment of a top commentary discussion that we've had from this season? If there are people finding the podcast between seasons, what are some good commentary episodes for them to pop into?
For me, I think I really loved our exploration of the relationship between tabletop safety tools and intimacy choreography, and that episode that we did with Ella to talk about the Apocalypse World Session 0.
Such a gem.
Process. Such a gem. They're the best.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I'll say swinging hard the opposite direction. I'll say, I know, I in all seriousness, I loved the episode that we recorded recently about character backstory, only because I think that the three of us actually have kind of very different ideas and takes on it. And I love that. I love hearing a variety of perspectives on something like that. So I enjoyed that. And it was also fun kind of play fighting with each other.
I think it was real fighting, Nicholas.
I think for me, the player as performer and audience episode was really where I did the most theory digging of the episodes that we've released, which was really exciting. It was exciting to dive into that in a way that I haven't in a while, of what do people feel about how the place of the performer is during different times, and how does that overlap with theater and how does that overlap with tabletops. So that was a really exciting episode to do, and I think for me was our first episode that was really about what the podcast is about. Where because to me the actual plays that we do are case studies, and they're very fun and very good and very delightful to listen to, but to me the episode 9 where we really sunk into let's talk about how these things intersect was very exciting.
Amazing. Are there any, for either of you, Percy, Todd, do either of you have any new kind of takeaways or thoughts about the ways that tabletop games and theater intersect? This episode is not going to release on our 1-year anniversary, but the three of us have certainly been working on this for well over a year now. So any new thoughts that have come to mind since we started the project?
I think for me, it's challenged a lot of the ways that I think about the way that we structure theater production and the ways that we make art together, even outside of it. Because we had a whole episode about devising, and how that sort of resonated with the Session 0 sort of collaborative world building of Apocalypse World. But I really do think that my approach to any kind of art making, devising or otherwise, has really been opened up to understanding like what magical things can happen when everybody is playing on an even field and everybody's input is equally weighed, and just what happens when you're like spitballing together and building off of each other and able to do all of this work together in the same place. So just, yeah, like my biggest takeaway is in both tabletop and in theater, like invest the time in spending time as a creative group who is producing something, like spend time together as a cast and like work on things together and let things be really, really collaborative, because it's time well spent both in like bonding everybody together and also like your art will be so much better for it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I've been doing a lot of thinking about like meaningful choice in immersive theater. Mm-hmm. This is something that's always been kind of in my mind, because I feel like a lot of times we say immersive when we mean you don't have chairs. And like the theater that is sometimes called immersive is theater that you walk around and you see people do things. And I think, especially given all of the like tabletop theory that I've been reading this past year, and about like how to best give players like real choices to make that have weight, that you can play off of, is even more important when we're trying to do immersive work, which I think is like more akin to tabletop improv than it is to what we see in immersive shows often. And I'm interested in how we can make more like gamified immersive theater with choice.
Mm-hmm. And you know, this is a slight tangent, but I also love this topic. So I'll just say, I think the tricky thing about it is that the hidden aspect of meaningful choice is that you have to know it's a meaningful choice and have some sense of the stakes, mm-hmm. which means that for most immersive shows, you know, the path that you choose through the show for many shows can't really be a meaningful choice, because even though it will absolutely determine your experience, if you have no sense of like what those choices mean when you're making them, mm-hmm. it's not going to feel, you know, you're not going to feel consequences. You're just going to pick arbitrarily and then feel either delighted or kind of screwed over. Yeah, I love that topic. Anyway,
do you have a takeaway, Nick?
I was originally going to say, one thing I love about this project is that for the past year, I have really felt my mind expand in terms of form, particularly when it comes to what a game can be. You know, reading games for the podcast, especially some of the more unusual fringy games like Avery Alder's Variations on Your Body, which is a collection that I love, and absolutely like 2 years ago, I would have looked at and been like, I don't get how this is a game for most of them. I think has given me a new appreciation both for what games are, but also has made me excited to try to find theater artists who are pushing the form in similar ways. Mm. And to find those artists who are kind of like on the very margins of creating things that maybe don't even look like theater at first, but still claiming it as such.
I mean, I know that we have both seen recently Theater: A Love Story, which spends a lot of time discussing how it is a play that does not look or operate like a play in any traditional way for most of it, which I found intriguing.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I've been sort of forced to like expand my understanding what theater is, because I think as an industry, we've had so many arguments about like what counts as film and what counts as theater and what makes a theatrical event. Is it liveness? Is it audience? Is it all of these things? And like ultimately, and maybe it's because I'm just like exhausted of having these arguments all the time as an industry, but I kind of just feel like it doesn't matter what you call it, as long as you enjoy doing it and you're making it, and the experience of making it is valuable. So I feel like similarly, like I've just like worn away at the like strict definitions that I used to hold for what certain things are.
Yeah.
Um,
I think categorizing is kind of a sucker's game, but it is also true. I'll say a disappointing part of doing this in the pandemic is that I want to find that theater work, and also just this is purely as a like personal thing. Most of the work that's not all, but much of the work that's happening online doesn't really grab me. I think that's just a like personal aesthetic thing. I don't relate to things as well through the screen. So I'm looking forward to being able to find this weird fringy stuff when the people who want to make that can make things that gather people in physical proximity again.
mm-hmm. I have another takeaway or just like personal like thing in the vein of like expanding definitions and whatnot. I feel like my understanding of dramaturgy has expanded in a lot of ways. Because for a really, really long time, like I didn't think of myself as like a performer. And while this is like perhaps an atypical kind of performance, being in a game that was being recorded for other people to listen to was like a pretty new-ish experience for me, or at least like an experience I've had in a really long time. And that was like, whoa. Not only am I not just a dramaturg, like the barriers between things, or the divisions between like job titles or job responsibilities or whatever in theater, I feel like could do with a little bit of wearing away, in terms of like, I feel like all of the casts of all of our actual plays this season were all contributing to like a shared dramaturgy of what we were doing. Because I feel like that's what tabletop games are. If you're like it's building a shared dramaturgy and telling a story together. So yeah, that's been nice, and it's like expanded my understanding of my practice as a dramaturg.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say my dramaturgy professor, her feeling, Dr. Jessica Hester, was that like everyone should be a dramaturg. Like a designer should be a dramaturg, and they should be doing historical research on like the period that they're setting their piece in, so they know what they are playing with and against. And an actor should be a dramaturg because they should understand the context of the work that they're doing, and that it shouldn't just be the burden of one person. There's like one person who does the extra research, but like all of us together should be bringing in different bits of information that can help fuel and form our collective understanding of what a piece can or cannot be.
Similarly, Jocelyn Clark, who is a dramaturg that works with Arena Stage, frequently told me like anybody can do the work of dramaturgy. A dramaturg is just a person who like mostly who the work that they're doing in a room is mostly the work of dramaturgy, but like you can tell anybody in a rehearsal, like, watch this run through and see how this character's arc works, like focus on that specifically, or look for moments where X happens, sort of thing. Like anybody can do that work if you tell them what to look for. That's in line too with like a broader conversation that's happening in the field of dramaturgy that I've seen sort of developing in terms of like troubling that notion of like expertise or like being the smartest person in a room, because I don't think any of the three of us believe that that's like what a dramaturg should be.
No. No, bad, gross. Well, I think that's a great place to segue over to our mailbag questions. We have a number of questions, mostly from people who've lived with me in the past. Lovely humans all. And our first question comes from Ben Ferber, who you'll know as Friend Computer, and the GM of our Paranoia campaign. And he asks, what is Dungeons and Dragons?
With 5 question marks.
With 5 question marks. That is important.
It's a real tough one, to be honest.
I mean, we've known for a while that Dungeons and Dragons is a manual for satanic rituals, meant to both spill the blood of the innocent and summon sex demons into your air ducts or something. I'm butchering
it's a steam tunnel.
Steam tunnels. Thank you. There we go. Summon sex demons into your steam tunnels.
That sounds like a euphemism.
So there you go, Ben.
I've always thought of Dungeons and Dragons as like a rather large sentient fish, a la perhaps what was it? The Leviathan.
I thought it was like a steamed bun variety, filled with like a mushroom, very like umami filling. Yeah, with a little bit of spice.
I can get into that.
Yeah. Next question. Becca asks. Becca asks, "What has been most surprising about making Dungeons and Drama Nerds Season 1?"
I'll answer that for myself. I honestly think one of the things I've been surprised by was how I'm going to qualify it, but how easy it was. By which I mean it was in fact a lot of work. But I was so delighted that we were able to find people who were excited about doing this work so quickly, and how quickly we were able to like generate ideas and work and exciting ideas between us and our casts and our GMs. And I'm super stoked to be starting work on season 2.
Yeah, I think for me the most surprising thing has been, and like I can mostly speak to the game that I played in, but I got the sense that this was similar for other folks as well. But like, we were a bunch of people who didn't really know each other particularly well within each cast. Like, it was like a lot of people are like individually friends with one or two of us, but the cast as a whole are not like people who are super familiar. But I feel like they all gelled together really quickly, and we sort of like formed these little communities that are just like really, really nice and lovely. And like, I don't want to flex, but I guess the point of this episode is like to flex a little bit. Like, I don't know. It was surprising to me that those casts really like found these really lovely friendships with each other. But also I feel like part of that is because like I'm proud of us for being really intentional about setting up an environment in which everybody felt like safe and able to be vulnerable with each other and able to really like invest fully in the work that we were doing. And that was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, echoing that, I feel like it was very, as someone who has only played D&D with like very close friends, it was exciting to be able to get to like weird character moments with people who didn't know each other very well in all of the games.
So our next question comes from Johnny from Portland. He asks, out of all the systems you've played, what's the best for beginners? Anybody want to take a crack at that one?
I'm going to take this opportunity to drop a hot take, which is that I think a lot of people, I'm going to answer like for me out of games that I personally have played rather than games we played on the podcast. Like, I think a lot of people say like, oh, play Honey Heist or Crash Pandas if you're a beginner. And I think that's absolutely not what you should do. Because unless you're a beginner who happens to like be super comfortable doing like improvisational role play and like kind of being extremely self-guided, because the game is not supporting you very much in terms of like the work that you're doing. So I would say a game, probably like one of the more like, I would say, as much as I hate to say it, like a game that is on the more popular end, because I feel like more people on the internet talk about it and you can find more resources about how to play it. Like an Apocalypse World or a Quest or something like that, like a game that has a lot of resources available, particularly if you're like me and a big research nerd and you love to just like read and look at all of the things. Or the other would be like, find a game that is about like there are TTRPGs for every possible niche like interest. Like if you're really into pirates, you could play Bro Is It Gay to Dock or whatever. Like you could
you certainly can. There might be other pirate tabletop games out there too.
There are other ones. That's the one that I read recently is why it's on my mind. Although, funny story, my friend Charlie, who spoiler, you'll meet on the podcast next season, sent me that game with the name of it in the email subject apropos of nothing. So I thought he was just sending me an email that was like asking me that question. Anyway, like if you have a really like specific thing that you're really into, or like if you are into witchcraft, like there are lots of games that use tarot cards as a mechanic or things like I think no matter how mechanics heavy or like if you find games that are like tapping into interests that you have, that is always a really, really good place to start, because you'll have that like investment in it. Like if you're really into tarot, you will love games that use tarot cards as their means of advancing the story. So that's my answer, is find something that you're really, really interested in, or a game that has a lot of resources available, or like actual plays available, or play Bros at Get a Dog.
Yeah, I'll second one of your suggestions, Percy, which is I would say Quest. If you have a group of beginners who are very interested in like what they perceive as D&D and have only like a distance, have not played before, have not like really done any research on it, and just know like vaguely fantasy role playing thing, I think Quest offers you like some customization and is like a simple system that is pretty easy for people to pick up and play with. If your group is a little more genre flexible, I would say do a little bit of digging and find a PBTA game that fits the genre you're looking at, because I think the only PBTA game I've really played is Masks, but I think they usually hit a good sweet spot of like, again, some customization. They usually have like a little ritual that walks you through character creation, which I think is helpful for new players. And they usually do a pretty good job of like getting the feel of the genre that you're interested in.
Yeah, I have similar vibes. I think that Masks is a really excellent game that I desperately want to play. I've done so much reading about it, but it sets, like, if you're cool with your genre being teenage superheroes, which I very much am, but if you want something that's a little more like classically fantasy, I feel like Mouse Ritter is a nice like rules light version of Dungeons and Dragons, which I feel to people who aren't like computer RPG players or just like gamers in general, it feels like so many forms and so much information, and it takes so long to get to a place where your character can do cool stuff. And in Mouse Ritter, you are a tiny mouse. You have a weapon or you don't. It is probably like a sewing needle. And it is your job to try to like ferry goods and fight cats. And it's adorable, but also is not as weighty as Dungeons and Dragons is. And you can make a character in like 2 or 3 minutes without having to flip to 5 different chapters of a 200-page source book. And I think in that way, it's much more accessible and easy to play and see like, oh, is this the kind of game that I want to play? Or do I want to play something that's very different, but still a role-playing game?
Mm-hmm. I also feel like the answer that I have for everything, which is like ask your group if they want, because some people want a game that's like super crunchy and full of rules to learn and lots of stuff to dig into. And some people don't. And some people really, really want to role play, and some people don't. So yeah, I also feel like, just to shout out an actual game that's not kind of a joke, I would say Cyberpunk. If you're interested in a crunchier system, Cyberpunk is a good place to start if you like science fiction, because the other like very, very popular science fiction offerings are notoriously like nightmarish to learn how to play.
I mean, I will say Cyberpunk Red came out and we have the book, and that book is bizarre.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it
I
is
don't
not
know
a
that
simple thing to
Cyberpunk
flip
is
through.
Approachable per se.
I'm very excited to play it with my roommates.
Yeah,
and
like
also it is a weird book.
It looks fun, but it's not like easy to pick up.
I'm just speaking as the kind of person that like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. So for people who are also extremely ambitious or have really strong Virgo energy, which is not a thing I personally have, one of those two things. Anyway, our next question. Our next question comes from Becca also, and it is, how have your perspective shifted on TTRPGs throughout season 1?
I think I've said this earlier, so I'll just summarize quickly. My understanding of what a TTRPG is has really expanded in ways that I'm excited about.
Yeah, prior to recording season 1, I had only like loosely read the games that we were going to be playing. And outside of that, had only played Dungeons and Dragons. And I think Apocalypse World and Masks and just PBTA games in general that focus. I mean, in so many ways, Apocalypse World feels like a pushback against the perceived failings of Dungeons and Dragons, which is like the character stuff doesn't always work. You can put it on there, but in many ways it is a combat simulator. Trying to make meaningful choice where like dice rolls always move you forward. There is no stagnation that you might have in like a miss. And so that has been very exciting in thinking about like, how do we take systems and build them better is something that's been very exciting for me about TTRPGs and how I've come to understand very different ones this year. Because it's not just like, what flavor of rolling a D20 do you want? Should there be cowboys or laser swords? And instead it's like, oh, like, do you care about meaningful relationships with your party members and the world? Do you care about language? Do you care about how the choices you make have good or bad influences on the world, and what does that do for you? Which is really exciting.
I love that. I think similarly for me, it's been an expansion of like what a game is, and also an expansion in like the ways that I'm interested in like games have become the way that I frame a lot of things in my mind, and a lot of like, along with expanding the definition of game, I've also become interested in a lot more. I'm starting a letter writing RPG with a friend of mine where we're going to send letters back and forth as a pair of queer lovers in history, which is an extremely gay activity. But like, that's the kind of thing I wouldn't be interested in perhaps, or as interested in perhaps. Like the TTRPG frame just like fits so many more things than I thought it would. To the point where I'm also like writing a TTRPG into my final for one of my graduate seminars this semester, which is wild. So yeah.
Our next question comes from Shannon. And she asks, what's a time your dice betrayed you? Okay, I want to get this off my chest.
Juice.
In the end of Paranoia, and this is the weirdest sort of a dice betrayal, I really wanted to use my mutant power, which just makes shit get weird. It was very cool. I was very excited to use it. But to do it, I wanted to like make something explode. And so I had rigged this wind cannon I had done all of these ridiculous things with the assumption that they would not work. And then I would key in my mutant power. But the betrayal of my dice is they were like, no, that worked pretty okay. And I was like, oh, I guess I won't juice it then. And then like something else happened. And I was like, oh, well, I guess these are okay. I was expecting very terrible rolls such that I could do something dumb and hilarious. And I was robbed.
Once again, Todd is too good.
My dice, they're too good.
I can tell this story. I'm trying to remember who listens to the podcast. I was running a game and I had this plan in my brain, as DMs shouldn't ever do, where I was like, I had this like assassin rogue NPC who was hiding in a room. And they were gonna like come out of hiding and use their assassinate power to like kill one of the party. Like it was gonna be amazing. It was gonna be really cool and sneaky. And they were fucking invisible also. So like all of the odds were in my favor. So I go to roll my stealth check with advantage and I get 2 natural ones.
Oh,
which is and it didn't work. And they killed my cool rogue. But that's okay.
This technically wasn't my dice, but I think it's a time that like dice generally and probability betrayed me. In the first edition Pathfinder game I was running several years ago, there was a ghost wizard who my party confronted, and I was like, and the party's monk was taunting the ghost wizard, and I was like, well, I'll teach him a lesson. And I had the wizard cast Phantasmal Killer on him. For those who aren't familiar with Phantasmal Killer, it's known in first edition Pathfinder for being a spell that isn't nearly as exciting as it seems, because I don't remember the exact mechanics, but basically the target gets to make 2 separate saving throws. And if they pass the first one, nothing happens at all. And if they pass the second one, they take a little bit of damage. And only if they fail both do they die. But like the odds of people failing both are very poor. Well,
oh no.
I cast Phantasmal Killer at my monk who had the best saves in the party, and he rolled like a 2. I was like, well, that's okay. I have another saving throw. And then he rolled a different die for the second one and got a 3. And that's how I killed the monk. Sorry, Dan.
Sorry, Dan. Our next question comes from Johnny. What are some good acting tools you can bring to the table to help encourage role-playing and improv?
I'll say something that was said to me recently. Be loud and wrong.
Could you elaborate?
No. No, I'll try.
I'm just going to shout misinformation whenever my party enters a tavern.
No. What it actually is an invocation to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like if you think of an exciting thing to do, dramatically, strategically, whatever, like it's better to take a swing and a miss than to constantly be like monitoring yourself and checking yourself and not doing that, because at the end of the day it's a game. So like, what's the worst that happens?
It's true. I think my biggest tip, the acting tool I would recommend employing, is active listening. Because you're at a table with like 5 or 6 other people, so chances are extremely good that like anything that you need to play off of is already being given to you, and it's just about like really absorbing and taking in what everybody else at the table is offering, and just bouncing off of that and staying really kind of reactive and in the moment. And it can be really easy to sort of drift off, but it's nice to sort of anchor in like in what other people are providing, and it makes it more fun for everybody, because like everybody loves to feel like, oh, like I said something and like everyone is playing off of it. Like there's a really good feeling. It's nice to kind of bounce that good feeling around the table.
I feel like in the games that I've run, the most exciting things have always been moments when the players interacted with each other. They are rare. Sometimes someone throwing a great crit at a pivotal moment is wonderful, and there's like cheers and hurrahs and uproar at the table. But the moments where someone is willing to really engage with another character on their level, and not just to achieve like, this is the next strategic beat or thing that we need to do, but to really like engage with each other, are the moments where I think people have the most fun. So like, play with your other players. Don't just play with the DM.
Yeah, there's in the game that I'm playing in right now, my character has like a budding friendship. Like he's like a loud and often wrong himbo guy. And he has this budding relationship with this like very brash and like confident and sneaky Yuan-Ti. And like they're an extremely unlikely pair, and it's extremely wholesome, their relationship that they're building. And it really like, it makes the game so much more fun to have that dynamic. So yeah.
Becca also asked us, what types of theater are you excited to make or produce or see, or all three, because of your work on Dungeons and Drama Nerds?
I mean, in many ways, this is the sort of work that I already liked making, but like, put ghosts in your goddamn plays, put some sword fights in there, have a good time. Why isn't there more magic on stage? We do unbelievable things all the time. Well, and I just think that this is something that came up at a talkback for a play that we're developing at Portland Stage called The Last Ship to Proxima Centauri. And it's set in a spaceship, and it's a sci-fi play, but it's like a sci-fi play about colonialism and America's legacy and like borders. And it's seen through the lens of like a spaceship 2,000 years from now. And I just like even more so, given the year that we've all had, but also the stories that we've gotten to tell on this podcast. Like, I think people who see genre as something other than, or particularly something less than, realism, and as like a style of theater that is incapable of telling moving, impactful human stories, just sounds silly to me. And I just don't see the point. And I think everyone should be doing plays that like get a little weird, because that's what we can do in the theater that I think is great, is we're liars. So like, let's lie to each other and tell interesting lies.
I will bring up something Todd said before that I've been very excited about. I just watched/played Io Gawa's Ludic Proxy Fukushima. And I was really excited by that because it's a theater piece that is also a game. And I am curious to see more pieces like that and to explore, what does it mean for a theater piece to be immersive? What does it mean for a theater piece to be interactive? And where the collisions between those two qualities are and lead us. And what does theater actually look like in the 21st century? Because we're still producing theater that mostly feels like it was written in the 1950s, and sometimes with updated music. It's really the only thing. Sometimes.
I think first of all, our friends at 4615 Theater are doing a video game play called Dark City. So check that out if that is something that you're interested in. I'm very excited to play it. It's going to be very cool. I think for me, what Dungeons and Drama Nerds has made me really, really excited to do more of is more devising, because I just really find that I thrive on the energy of like collaborative world building. And I got really excited to just work on more things that are cool and weird with my friends. But also really like do theater that has to be built together from a group, because you don't have a script that you're working from. So that's my biggest thing that I got excited about working on.
Yeah. We got another one from Johnny. How do you balance bending the rules for role playing while still being a consistent DM? I think this is something that I kind of struggle with personally. Like, when do you stick the landing of a cool story beat, and when does like player agency mess with that? And not in the like, oh, my players aren't doing what I want them to do, but like, ooh, I want to leave you on a cliffhanger. What if this person shows up and monologues at you a little bit, and blah, 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 and then disappears or whatever. And I was listening to, I think it's called The DM's Guide. It's a podcast. And this guy was talking about making the things that your players want to do the things that they can do, and also removing things that you don't want to do from their choice in a way that makes sense. And one of the ways that he looked at this was looking at Mass Effect. And he talks about like the first time you really see the villain in Mass Effect, whose name I don't remember. He appears on a hologram in this like court case. Like, you're trying to harangue him for crimes that he like did against you, and he only appears on holovid. Because if you were playing the game and you have player choice, you would want to take him out. He's an evil guy. He tried to blow up your ship. He tried to blow up your friends. And if he showed up in front of you, you would try to kill him. And if you had agency, you would do that. And the game doesn't want you to yet, because you're supposed to deal with that villain later. And so by removing the choice to attack him physically, you then have to like act, the players have to act in a very different way. And I think I am trying to find the proper ways to like limit player choice in order to tell compelling stories, while also having very meaningful choice that allows them to change how the narrative is going. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
No, I think it does. I've been struggling with that a little bit too lately, and I think it does depend. I think part of it is picking your system and knowing it well. And I mean that on the group level, not just for the GM, because I think the thing is, ideally, you don't have to bend the rules because you all want to play the game that you're playing, if that makes, you know what I mean? Like in a perfect world. And of course, this is rarely the case. And that's why house rules come in and GMs like bending the rules come into play. But in perfect world, everybody is enthused about playing the particular game that you're playing. So the rules just support the story you want to tell rather than getting in the way. I will say for me lately, so I'm playing 2nd edition Pathfinder right now, which is one of those D20 games where you have to where the players sort of have to be in a slightly reactive stance because the game is complicated enough that's hard to improvise. It's hard to purely improvise. It's hard to go into a session as a GM with actually nothing prepared. You would have to be very good at searching the SRD to find challenges on the fly. But I've been trying to reduce the amount that I have prepped and really get to know my group so that I can judge, how much are they likely to try to do in a session? And then I can only prepare the things that I think I will actually need for the session. And that can give me some sense of whether I need to invent a rule or bend a rule ahead of time.
Yeah, I think the rule that I have the most trouble with in terms of bend, I have a really hard time as a DM not metagaming in terms of deciding what is happening when the party is not there, how the world is turning if the party chooses not to interact with certain things. I have a hard time. I always second guess, am I doing this because it's dramatically interesting, or because it's the thing that would happen? Is it both, or am I just doing things that I think are fun? But I think part of that second guessing also comes from just the way that culturally we talk about the role of the DM, which I'm very happy that we're sort of interrogating in the podcast. Because I feel like there's this antagonism that is baked into how we talk about that role that I am just gonna abandon, and feel good about my choices. I'm feeling particular guilt about this recently because in my home game, the party made some probably poor decisions, and they have are facing a lot of consequences for it. Many chickens came home to roost in one session.
Consequences for my actions?
Unthinkable. They were really shocked Pikachu about it too, which is extremely funny to me.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they killed a bunch of guards and acolytes of this church that they're very they're trying to bring down because the church is evil. Not all churches, but this specific church. Well, we won't get into. That's a different podcast. And then they were like, "Oh, we left no survivors. It'll be fine." But Speak with Dead is a spell that exists, and other people were on the it's a. What did you expect? So yeah, I have trouble with metagaming and how much metagaming is actually fine. Because ultimately, also, if we're trying to tell an interesting story, you should probably choose to do the dramatically interesting thing as long as there is a legitimate justification for it in the story.
We have 2 more questions. One comes from Shannon, who asks, what's a game mechanic you wish you could pick up from one game and transplant into another?
I think definitely, I just had a conversation about this yesterday with some folks, actually. I think I would, if I had to choose only one mechanic, it would be applying the mixed success mechanic of Powered by the Apocalypse games to any other game, but particularly D20 games. Because there are some D20 games where they'll be if you fail by 5 or more, this happens, or if you succeed by 5 or more, this happens, sort of thing. But I feel rather than hard DCs, ranges are a lot more flexible and a lot more dramatically interesting. So that would be my answer.
That is almost exactly the thing I was going to say. I would just tweak it slightly to say not only the mixed success, but I really love the way that the whole engine for Powered by the Apocalypse is the player's actions. And so that, like, you know, in at least Masks, again, the only one I've played directly, you know, I, as the GM, really only make a move when the players fail a roll. And I like that. Like, the story advances by what the players do, succeed or fail, but it doesn't devolve into this, like, just mechanical, okay, you take a turn, you take a turn, you take a turn, I take a turn, you take a turn, it keeps the kind of engagement varied, I think, which I like.
Mm-hmm. I just love the group character creation in Masks, and I think it's so cool and magical for building bonds between a party. I think we have talked before about how a lot of D20 systems are like, you build your character on your own because you're filling out your tax forms, and then you come into session 1 or session 0, whichever, and you just like present a fully fleshed out character. And what I love is, like, how can you work with and against this other character concept? How can you accentuate them or foil them? How can you do those things that support and uplift? Who do you look up to? And, like, having that already made together, to me, is so exciting.
That gave me an idea for a tabletop game where you have to literally do a PowerPoint presentation on your character at the beginning, which would be probably a terrible game. This is why I'm not a game designer.
I was gonna say, I don't know if I would play that game.
I love PowerPoints. What can I say? That's not true, actually.
Just lying. Percy just lying over here.
You were the one who said we're all a bunch of liars telling lies together.
In the theater.
Life
also
is
on our
theater.
podcast.
Also on our podcast. Anyway, our last question comes from Johnny, and it is, how do you translate story beats into the structure of an evolving cooperative narrative?
Okay, this is my hot take one. I actually wonder, again, as my understanding of tabletop role-playing games has expanded, there's a part of me that's like, should you though? Like, is that actually, do we have to be married to this Aristotelian plot is the highest point of everything ethos that is, you know, that's pervaded our theater and our understanding of narrative for the past, you know, 2,500 years? Or, you know, like, sometimes, yes, you land those story beats in even in an ongoing narrative campaign, like, you land those story beats and it's amazing, but also, you know, sometimes you have a shopping session, and, you know, a session where, like, it's between adventures and the players are just like, I'm going to bop around town and, like, make out with the barmaid or buy a house or whatever, you know, like, buy equipment. And those can be really lovely too. And they can be moments of community and of interaction and of joy that aren't driven by story beats. And I think the kind of conventional wisdom of you have to figure out a way to, like, get the party on this narrative can actually obscure those moments, or can push you to, like, roll past them, because it's like, oh, if I don't get, like, a cliffhanger or a turn or something in here in this, like, game session, then then it will be disappointing. And it's like, well, no, actually, like, probably in every group I've played with, like, people are enjoying being around each other and hanging out. And that's kind of a fundamental thing. So you don't have to stress out about story beats that much, I think. I just don't think you do.
To sort of build off of that, I feel like what I would say is we should change our understanding of, like, the story of a TTRPG, because I feel like, assuming that you're playing a game that is about, like, a party of characters doing things in a world, because there are many games that aren't that, and that, like, encounter that separately. But I feel like, rather than saying, like, here's a story that this group is, like, navigating through or, like, experiencing, think of it as, like, the story is the story of the party in the world, and it is actively being written as we go. So I think, rather than saying, like, yeah, like, here are the beats of what's going to happen, framing it as yeah, maybe I know what's going on in the broader world and what like plot hooks and things they might encounter or what might happen. Thinking of it instead as like, we're telling the story of this group of people not only like helps you center your players, but also leaves a lot of space for like, yeah, like I want to hang out in the market and talk to all of the nobles, and make the DM come up with names and backstories for like 7 NPCs. And like, that is just as valid a part of the story. And I think that's what I would say. That's my hot take, is like, when we talk about story, I think we need to talk about the story of the party and the people in the room at the table together, as opposed to like the grand story.
Mm-hmm. I feel like I've been shifting a lot of my ideas about DMing lately, and especially on like a session by session basis, because I do want it to feel like something has been achieved. We have accomplished something. Things are different now than when they were before we started playing tonight. And I feel like the thing that I have been trying to trying to use as a guiding principle is to we do 3-hour sessions. And I read somewhere a while ago that like you can achievably normally get through one encounter an hour. And that might be a discussion with a character, where you're getting information out of them. That might be combat. That might be going shopping. Shopping might take you an hour. And so I try to have like 3 discrete, not story beats, but like possibilities of things that they might do. And often they go off the rails and go into different places than I was expecting them to. And I'd try to accommodate that as best I can. But there's something for having like, here's an opportunity, and not here's a story beat. Like, here's an opportunity for y'all to shift or change what's going on. And I think you might address it this way or this way, but like the goal is that you will have addressed it by the time that we've like finished this session. And here's another opportunity beat if we get past that one. And here's a third for after that, is kind of how I've been trying to think of it. And so less delivering story and more presenting opportunity, which I think when I started conceiving of DMing that way, it really realigned things for me in a way that I've found useful.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like it's so hard though to strike the balance between like kind of knowing like what could be, so that you're not just like making shit up on the fly, while also like, yeah, leaving room for agency and really letting things be collaborative. One thing I really appreciated about the way that John structured Irremediably Home was that like it didn't feel like a story with a beginning and an end. It felt like we said, hey, we should wrap up the campaign soon, and he was like, great, I'll find a stopping point. But you could hop back into that game tomorrow, and same with the Paranoia campaign.
Yeah.
So I think those two were definitely like the D&D adventure was like an adventure, with a kind of beginning, middle, and end. Yeah, I think we sort of in the podcast experience that sort of evolution towards like collaborative, more open-ended, more incremental story building, as opposed to like going through an Aristotelian structured thing.
And again, I think that speaks to system, and how much a system expects you to prep, D&D fairly heavily, Paranoia kind of not at all ahead of time. And I'll just say, for the things that do expect you to prep, if you are interested in player agency and so on, you also just have to be willing to throw things out. And that is, hopefully you can repurpose them later, but like, I have planned a chase sequence for my upcoming game, and that took some time. But also, if they find a way to avoid the chase sequence, I just have to honor that, and I'll be like, well, I'll save that elaborate chase sequence for another time.
See, I built my party 2 dungeons because I know, in theory, they would only need to pick one of them. But I know them well enough to know, A, if I were to only prepare one, they would choose to do the other. And B, chances are extremely good that like once the big scary fight that they are planning to start is over, they will be like, let's go check out the other place to see what's there. So I have the opposite problem of like, if I mention that something is an option, they'll absolutely go and check it out. Which I say with the most love in the world.
Well, and I also think this is one of those things about how we describe, like, part of the problem of this all being theater of the mind is that by describing anything, you make it important. But if you're even just trying to give like background color to a thing and you're like, there's a window in the room, sometimes there's like, well, I need to investigate the window because it must be important. And it's like, no, there just happens to be a window because sometimes rooms have windows. And managing those expectations of like, this is the thing that I want. There was a stool that was on its side. That was what I was hoping you'd get into. And instead we're opening a window a bunch.
Did I tell you all about the customs officer?
No.
Oh no.
In my current game, the last time the party went on a journey to like a different country, I was trying to like set the scene. So I described the city and how, the architecture and the climate and so on is different from where they came from. And then I had the guy who was meet them at the docks. And he was like, okay, now we have to go through customs. And I made up this customs officer in what I thought was going to be a like silly bit to ask them like a couple of questions about the like normal customs questions about like, who are you and what are you doing in this country? And they were like, the government in this place is out to get us. I was like, no, you're just a bunch of foreigners coming into an organized nation state and they want to know who you are. So yeah, it's a good example of that. They spent 2 sessions convinced that there is some government conspiracy until eventually I was like, you guys, the government literally has nothing to do with it.
I feel like that even came up in our D&D campaign on the podcast because like Kevin and Renee were like intent on like, we're going to question every single person in this tavern for all of the information that they had. And I'm looking at Matt Minnicino's wonderful module that he wrote, which had like 2 bullet points of information, and they spent so long in there. And I felt like eventually I had to almost explicitly be like, there's nothing else here. Like I always want to yes and I want to like honor what the players are bringing, but there has to be like I definitely reached a point where I was just like, I can't be clear enough that like there is no more information to be gained.
Please leave.
Please go do something else. Well, I think that's a great note for us to say thank you so much for listening to the first season of Dungeons and Drama Nerds, and stay tuned at the beginning of May for the official announcement of our second season, which will launch on May 26th. We are super excited to bring you a whole bunch of new games.
Dungeons and Drama Nerds is produced by Todd Brian Backus, Percy Hornak, and Nick Orvis, and is mixed and edited by Anthony Sertel Dean. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at DN Drama Nerds. You can find cast bios on our website, dungeonsanddramanerds.com, and stay tuned for our season announcement for Season 2, coming soon.